We match, Daddy.
Those were 8-year-old Emma's last recorded words before she and her father vanished from their mountain camp. Their matching blue jackets were supposed to keep them safe. Instead, they became the only clue to an impossible mystery. The breakthrough came 5 years later, when an expert climber discovered their jackets clinging to a cliff face 300 feet above ground. The fabric looked brand new, the colors unfaded, as if time had stopped the moment they vanished. David Chen had been planning this camping trip for months. As a single father working 60-hour weeks as a software engineer in Seattle, quality time with his daughter was precious. 8-year-old Emma was his entire world, a bright, curious girl who asked endless questions about everything around her. But when had David last really listened to those questions? "Daddy, can we go camping like the families in my storybooks?" Emma had asked one rainy evening in October 2018, looking up from her picture book about forest adventures. David glanced at his laptop screen, code still running in the background. "Maybe next weekend, sweetheart." But next weekend never came. There was always another deadline, another client meeting, another emergency that demanded his attention. Then Emma's teacher called. "Mr. Chen, I'm concerned about Emma. She's been telling her classmates that her daddy is too busy to play with her anymore. She seems lonely." That phone call changed everything. David realized he was losing the most important thing in his life while chasing things that didn't matter nearly as much. That evening, he closed his laptop and sat on the floor next to Emma's bed. "How would you like to go on a real camping adventure? Just you and me?" Emma's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Really, Daddy? A real camping trip? The realest camping trip ever. We'll hike, tell ghost stories, roast marshmallows, look at stars, everything you've dreamed about." But dreams don't always survive contact with reality, do they? David spent weeks researching the perfect location. He wanted somewhere beautiful but safe, challenging but not dangerous. Mount Cascade National Park seemed ideal. Established trails, ranger stations nearby, family-friendly campsites. He booked campsite 23 for the first weekend in November. The weather forecast looked perfect. Clear skies, mild temperatures, no chance of rain. Everything was planned. Everything was safe. Or so he thought. The night before they left, David couldn't sleep. Something felt different about this trip. Not wrong, exactly. Just significant. Like this weekend would change both their lives in ways he couldn't predict. He was right about that. But not in the way he'd imagined. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Emma bounced around the apartment, her excitement infectious. "Is it time to go yet, Daddy? Is it time?" David packed their supplies carefully. Tent, sleeping bags, first aid kit, emergency radio, GPS device. He'd researched every piece of equipment, read reviews, made lists. Nothing was left to chance. "Daddy, what about our jackets?" Emma asked, pointing to the matching blue windbreakers hanging in the closet. David had bought them the week before, identical Columbia jackets in bright royal blue. Emma had insisted they needed to match like a team for their adventure. "We match, Daddy," she'd said when they tried them on at the store. "Now everyone will know we belong together." Those words echoed in David's mind as he helped her put the jacket on that Saturday morning. Such innocent words. Such a simple wish to belong together. They drove toward the mountains, singing along to Emma's favorite songs. She pressed her face against the window, watching the city fade into forests. "Look, Daddy, real trees, millions of them." "Are you excited?" David asked, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. "This is the best day ever," Emma replied. "Even better than Christmas." David's heart swelled. When had he last seen his daughter this happy? When had they last shared an adventure that didn't involve screens or schedules or the constant pressure of everyday life? They reached Mount Cascade National Park at 2 p.m. The ranger station was busy with weekend campers checking in, families loading backpacks, couples studying trail maps. "First time camping with us?" asked Ranger Johnson, a friendly woman in her 50s who reviewed David's reservation. "First time camping anywhere for Emma," David said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "I want to make it special. Campsite 23 is perfect for beginners. Close to the main trail, clean restrooms nearby, but still feels like real wilderness. You'll love it." Emma tugged on David's jacket. "Daddy, look! We really do match." Other families smiled at the sight of the father and daughter in their identical blue jackets. They looked like they belonged together. They looked happy. They looked like people who would return home safely after a perfect weekend. The drive to their campsite wound through towering Douglas firs and ancient pines. Emma's excitement grew with every mile. "It's like a fairy tale forest, Daddy. Are there bears?" "Small black bears, but they're more afraid of you than you are of them," David explained. "We'll store our food properly, make noise while hiking, and they'll stay away." But bears weren't what they should have been worried about, were they? Campsite 23 sat in a clearing surrounded by massive evergreens, a fire ring, picnic table, and level ground for their tent. Perfect for a father-daughter bonding weekend. Too perfect, perhaps. They spent the afternoon setting up camp. Emma helped with everything. Unrolling sleeping bags, arranging their food supplies, gathering kindling for the fire. She was serious about her duties as camping partner. "Are we doing it right, Daddy?" she asked, looking up from the pile of twigs she'd collected. "We're doing it perfectly," David said. And they were. Everything felt natural, easy, right. As evening approached, David built their first campfire. Emma watched in fascination as flames danced to life, casting warm light across their little camp. "It's magical," she whispered. "It really is." They cooked hot dogs on sticks, roasted marshmallows until they were perfectly golden, and shared stories about their day. Emma talked about which trees looked like friendly giants and which rocks resembled sleeping animals. "Daddy, do you think the forest dreams at night?" she asked, snuggled against his side as stars appeared overhead. "What do you think it dreams about?" "Happy families having adventures together. Like us." David held his daughter closer. This was what he'd been missing. This connection, this peace, this pure joy in simple moments. "I love you, Emma. I love you too, Daddy. Can we do this every weekend? We'll do this as often as you want." But some promises are impossible to keep. Some moments are too perfect to last. They went to bed around 9 p.m., exhausted, but happy. Emma fell asleep immediately, her breathing soft and steady in the sleeping bag next to his. David lay awake longer, listening to the forest sounds, wind through branches, distant owl calls, the gentle pop and hiss of their dying campfire. Everything was peaceful. Everything was safe. Everything was exactly as it should be. But in the deeper woods, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting for exactly this kind of moment. This kind of love. This kind of perfect target. David finally drifted off to sleep around midnight, his arm protectively around his daughter's shoulders. Neither of them heard the footsteps that circled their tent in the hours before dawn. Footsteps that made no sound on the forest floor. Neither of them saw the shadows that moved differently than shadows should. And neither of them knew that by morning they would be gone, leaving behind only warm sleeping bags and a mystery that would haunt these mountains for years to come. But the matching blue jackets would remember everything. Sunday morning came too quiet. Park Ranger Johnson made her routine rounds at 7 a.m., checking on weekend campers before the breakfast rush. She liked this part of the job, seeing families wake up to their first mountain sunrise, kids excited about the day's adventures ahead. But when she reached campsite 23, something felt wrong. No sounds of morning activity, no coffee brewing, no excited chatter from an 8-year-old who should be bubbling with energy after her first night camping. "Mr. Chen? Emma? Everything okay over there?" Silence. Johnson approached the tent cautiously. The campfire had burned down to cold ashes, which was normal, but their car was still there. Their food was still neatly arranged on the picnic table, untouched by wildlife. So where were David and Emma? She called out again, louder this time. "Hello, Mr. Chen." Still nothing. Johnson unzipped the tent flap and peered inside. 2 sleeping bags lay flat and empty, still warm to the touch, but the people who'd been sleeping in them were simply gone. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, stepping back from the tent. People don't just evaporate from their sleeping bags, especially not a responsible father and his young daughter. But the evidence was undeniable. David and Emma Chen had vanished without leaving a single trace. Johnson radioed the ranger station immediately. "We have a situation at campsite 23. 2 campers are missing, a father and 8-year-old daughter. No signs of struggle, no indication where they went." Within 30 minutes, Ranger Captain Mike Torres arrived with 2 additional rangers. Torres had 20 years of wilderness experience. He'd handled lost hikers, injured climbers, confused tourists who wandered off marked trails. But he'd never seen anything quite like this. The campsite told a story that made no sense. Everything was perfectly organized, as if David and Emma had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of the night. Their hiking boots sat neatly beside the tent entrance. Their jackets, those matching blue jackets Emma had been so excited about, hung from a tree branch where they had left them to air out. But where were the people who belonged to those boots, those jackets? "Any chance they went for an early hike?" asked Ranger Martinez, the newest member of the team. Torres shook his head. "Not without their boots, not without their jackets. Look at this." He gestured to the picnic table, where David had left their hiking map spread out, marked with planned routes for today's adventures. A thermos of coffee sat half full, still faintly warm. Emma's coloring book was open to a page showing a happy family around a campfire. She'd been working on it the night before. Everything suggested they'd planned to wake up and continue their camping trip. Nothing suggested they'd intended to leave. "We need to call in a search team," Torres decided. By 10 a.m., 12 trained searchers had arrived. They divided into 4 groups, each taking a different compass direction from campsite 23. The plan was systematic. Cover a half-mile radius, look for any sign of passage, any clue about where David and Emma might have gone. But what they found was more puzzling than helpful. The first team discovered something strange about 200 yards north of the campsite. A perfect circle of dead grass, roughly 15 feet in diameter. Nothing grew inside it. The earth looked scorched, but there was no evidence of fire or chemical damage. "What do you think caused this?" Martinez asked his partner. "Lightning strike, maybe. But there haven't been any storms recently." The second team found fresh tree markings carved into several Douglas firs. Not random scratches, precise geometric patterns like symbols from an unknown language. The cuts were clean, recent, made with tools David and Emma hadn't been carrying. "These look hours old," the team leader reported via radio, "but our missing campers didn't have any carving equipment." The third team made the most disturbing discovery of all. They found Emma's hair ribbon. It was tied around a branch 20 feet up an ancient pine tree, not dropped or blown by wind, carefully tied in a perfect bow, exactly the way Emma always wore it. But how had it gotten 20 feet off the ground? Emma was barely 4 feet tall. David couldn't have climbed that high without rope and equipment he didn't possess. "This is impossible," whispered the searcher who spotted it. "Nobody could reach that branch without professional climbing gear." The fourth team found David's wallet. It sat on a fallen log 3 miles from their campsite, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. His driver's license, credit cards, emergency cash, everything was still inside, perfectly organized. Except for one detail that made everyone's blood run cold. The family photo in David's wallet, the one showing him and Emma at her last birthday party, was missing. Carefully removed, not torn out, as if someone had wanted to keep that specific image. But who? And why? The search expanded. 24 searchers, then 40. They used tracking dogs, thermal imaging equipment, helicopter flyovers, every modern resource available for finding missing persons in wilderness areas. The dogs caught David and Emma's scent at the campsite but lost it completely after 50 yards, as if their trail had simply ended in midair. Thermal imaging showed no heat signatures in the surrounding forest. Helicopter observers saw no movement, no disturbance in the vegetation that might indicate where 2 people had passed through. It was as if David and Emma had been lifted straight up into the sky. But people don't just fly away, do they? By Monday evening, the official search covered 60 square miles of dense forest. News crews arrived, broadcasting the story of the missing father and daughter who'd vanished from their tent without explanation. David's ex-wife, Sarah, flew in from Portland. She and David had divorced 2 years earlier, but they'd maintained a friendly relationship for Emma's sake.
"This isn't like David,"
she told reporters, tears streaming down her face.
"He's the most careful person I know. He planned everything about this trip down to the smallest detail. He would never put Emma in danger."
But Emma was in danger now, wasn't she? Somewhere out there in the vast wilderness, a 8-year-old girl and her father were missing. Possibly injured. Possibly worse. The search teams found more strange evidence as the hours passed. More geometric symbols carved into trees. More circular patches of dead vegetation. More personal items positioned in impossible locations. Emma's favorite crayon found balanced on a rock formation 40 feet above ground. David's watch discovered inside a hollow tree that showed no signs of human access. Each clue raised more questions than it answered. Each discovery made the mystery deeper instead of clearer. On Tuesday morning, the official search was called off. The Park Service issued standard statements about how sometimes people simply vanish in wilderness areas, how nature can be unpredictable and unforgiving. But the searchers who'd walked those forests for 3 days knew this case was different. This wasn't about people getting lost or injured. This was about something else entirely. Something that didn't follow normal rules. Ranger Torres couldn't let it go. He'd found those matching blue jackets hanging from their tree branch, exactly where David and Emma had left them to dry. 2 jackets that should have been worn by 2 people who should have been heading home after a perfect weekend. Instead, the jackets hung empty in the mountain breeze, waiting for their owners to return. Some mysteries stick with you, don't they? Some questions won't leave you alone, no matter how much time passes. Torres kept David and Emma's case file on his desk for months afterward, reviewing the evidence, studying the photographs, trying to find some detail he'd missed. But the truth was about to remain hidden for 5 long years. Hidden until a professional climber looked up at an impossible cliff face and saw something that would change everything. 5 years passed. The Chen case became a cold file buried in Ranger Station archives. David's ex-wife moved to California, unable to bear the constant reminders of loss. The media moved on to other stories. Life continued, but some mysteries refused to stay buried. Alex Rodriguez was one of the world's most skilled free climbers. At 34, he'd conquered vertical rock faces that other climbers considered impossible. Mount Cascade's eastern cliff system had drawn him here in November 2023, the same month David and Emma had vanished 5 years earlier. But Alex knew nothing about the missing father and daughter. He was here for the rock, not the history. Perfect conditions, he muttered, checking his equipment one final time. Clear skies, minimal wind, ideal temperature for an ascent that had never been attempted before. The cliff face towered 400 feet above him, a sheer wall of granite that seemed to touch the clouds. Local climbers called it the Impossible Wall, because its surface offered almost no natural handholds. Alex had spent months studying photographs, planning his route, preparing for this moment. What he was about to discover would make him question everything he thought he knew about reality. Alex began his climb at dawn, moving carefully up the vertical rock. Free climbing required absolute focus. One mistake, one moment of lost concentration could mean death. But something kept distracting him as he climbed higher. A splash of color against the gray granite. Something that didn't belong on this remote cliff face. At first, he thought it might be prayer flags left by previous climbers. Some mountaineers marked their routes with colorful fabric, though it was unusual to see any on such a challenging climb. By the time Alex reached 300 feet, he could see exactly what was catching his attention. 2 jackets, bright blue windbreakers, hanging perfectly from the rock face as if someone had carefully arranged them there. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Nobody climbed this wall. Alex was attempting the first successful ascent in recorded history. So, how had 2 jackets gotten 300 feet up an impossible cliff? Alex secured himself to the rock and moved closer to examine the jackets. What he saw defied every law of physics and logic he'd ever learned. The jackets weren't attached to the cliff with ropes or carabiners. They weren't stuffed into cracks or wedged behind rock formations. They were simply hanging in midair, pressed against the granite surface, as if held by invisible hands. "This can't be real," Alex whispered, his voice echoing off the stone walls around him. He reached out to touch one of the jackets. The moment his fingers made contact, he felt a shock of cold that had nothing to do with mountain air. The fabric was perfectly preserved, no fading from years of sun exposure, no deterioration from rain and snow, no damage from the harsh mountain climate. These jackets looked brand new, as if they'd been placed here yesterday. But the strangest part was what Alex found in the jacket pockets. A child's drawing, carefully folded and protected in a Ziploc bag. The artwork showed 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, standing beside a tent under a smiling sun. In a child's careful handwriting, The words, "Me and Daddy camping," were written across the bottom. Alex's hands trembled as he unfolded the drawing. No paper could survive 5 years of mountain weather and remain this pristine. The colors were still vibrant. The pencil marks showed no smudging. It was as if time had stopped the moment this drawing was placed in the jacket pocket. In the second jacket, Alex discovered something even more unsettling. A photograph of a man and young girl, both wearing the exact same blue jackets he was looking at. The man had kind eyes and a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. The girl was beaming at the camera, her smile so bright and genuine it made Alex's chest tighten with emotion. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "David and Emma, first camping trip, November 2018. November 2018, 5 years ago. Alex realized he wasn't just looking at abandoned clothing. He was looking at evidence from the missing persons case that had baffled search teams for years. But how had these jackets gotten 300 feet up a cliff face that no human being had ever climbed before? Alex used his helmet camera to document everything. The impossible positioning of the jackets, the perfect preservation of the fabric, the untouched items in the pockets, evidence that would force investigators to reconsider everything they thought they knew about David and Emma Chen's disappearance. As he prepared to continue his climb, Alex noticed something else that made his blood run cold. Fresh footprints in the thin layer of snow that had collected on a narrow ledge just above the jackets. Small footprints, the size a young child might make. But no child could reach this ledge. No adult could reach this ledge without advanced climbing equipment and years of training. Alex was the first person to get this high on the eastern cliff face. So whose footprints were these? Alex followed the prints along the ledge, his heart pounding harder than it should even at this altitude. The prints led to what appeared to be a shallow cave, barely visible behind a screen of ice and rock. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Alex secured his safety rope and entered the cave. What he found inside changed everything. The cave was warm, not the damp cold of most mountain caverns, but genuinely warm, as if heated by some invisible source. And scattered across the cave floor were more personal items. A child's hairbrush with blonde strands still tangled in the bristles. A man's wallet with credit cards perfectly arranged inside. Camping equipment that looked like it had been carefully stored rather than abandoned. But the most disturbing discovery was carved into the cave wall. Words etched deep into the solid rock, as if written with incredible force. "We're here. We're safe. Don't look for us." Below that, in smaller text, "Time works differently here." And at the bottom, in what was clearly a child's handwriting, "I love you, Mommy." Alex stared at the wall carvings until his eyes watered. These words were fresh, recent. The rock dust around the letters was still bright white, indicating they'd been carved within days, not years. But David and Emma Chen had been missing for 5 years. If they were still alive, how were they surviving in these mountains? And what did "time works differently here" mean? Alex photographed everything before making his descent. By the time he reached the base of the cliff, his mind was spinning with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. He drove straight to the ranger station, still wearing his climbing gear, demanding to speak with whoever had handled the Chen missing persons case. Ranger Torres, now graying and planning his retirement, listened to Alex's story with growing amazement. When Alex showed him the photographs, Torres had to sit down. "Those are definitely David and Emma's jackets," he confirmed, studying the images on Alex's camera. "I remember them perfectly. Emma was so proud that she and her father matched." "But how did they get 300 feet up a cliff face?" Alex asked. Torres had been asking himself the same question for 5 years. Now, finally, he might have a chance to find some answers. "We need to go back up there," he said, "tonight, before word gets out and this becomes a media circus." But what they were planning to discover would prove that some mysteries are more dangerous than they appear. Some secrets are hidden for reasons that have nothing to do with protecting the missing. And some caves lead to places that exist beyond the normal flow of time and space. That night, Alex Rodriguez and Ranger Torres returned to the eastern cliff face. What they were about to discover would challenge everything they thought they knew about reality itself. But some truths are more dangerous than the mysteries they replace. The ascent took Alex 90 minutes in darkness. Torres followed on a parallel safety line despite his limited climbing experience. By midnight, they stood on the narrow ledge outside the cave, their headlamps cutting through mountain darkness.
"Are you sure about this?"
Torres asked, looking at the cave entrance that seemed to pulse with strange warmth. Alex had climbed mountains on every continent. He'd never seen anything like what waited inside this cave. They entered together, moving slowly, documenting everything. The cave was larger than it had appeared during Alex's first visit. The walls stretched back into deeper chambers. That inexplicable warmth grew stronger the further they ventured inside, but it was the sound that made them both freeze. Voices, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere deep within the cave system. A man's voice. "Emma, stay close to me." A child's voice, excited. "Daddy, look, there are more tunnels." David and Emma, 5 years after they'd vanished from their mountain campsite. Torres called out, his voice echoing through stone passages. "David, Emma, this is Ranger Torres. Are you here?" The voices stopped. Silence filled the cave like a held breath. Then, from much closer, "Someone's coming, Daddy. I hear new voices." Alex tried his radio. Only static. His cell phone showed no signal. They'd entered a dead zone where normal communication couldn't penetrate. But what if this wasn't about technology failure? What if they'd entered somewhere that normal rules didn't apply? They pressed deeper into the cave, following voices that seemed to move through rock itself. The walls were covered with carvings, dates, messages, what looked like a journal written in stone. November 15th, 2018. We found the entrance. Emma isn't scared. December 2018. Time moves strangely here. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow. 2019. We can see our old world through stone windows, but we can't return. 2021. Emma drew pictures on the walls. She says they help her remember sunshine. The dates continued, year after year. A father and daughter documenting their life in a place that existed outside normal reality. Alex stopped at the most recent carving. November 2023. A climber found our jackets. Maybe someone will finally understand. Yesterday's date, the day Alex had made his discovery. "They knew I was coming," Alex whispered. But how could people survive 5 years in a cave system without supplies, without medical care? And Emma would be 13 now, not 8, unless time truly did work differently in this place. As they ventured deeper, the cave walls became transparent in places, like windows made of stone. Through these impossible openings, they could see glimpses of other times and places, a view of Campsite 23 on the night David and Emma disappeared. The father and daughter walking hand in hand toward a glowing entrance that hadn't been visible in daylight. Emma's voice, crystal clear. "It's beautiful, Daddy, like a fairy tale door." David's voice, cautious but trusting. "If you're sure it's safe, sweetheart." They watched their past selves step through what looked like solid rock and vanish from their own timeline. Another window showed David and Emma in this same cave system, but different, larger, filled with soft light. Emma was drawing on walls while David carved his journal entries. Both looked exactly as they had 5 years ago. "They're not aging," Torres breathed. "They're existing in some kind of temporal bubble." But the most disturbing window showed something else. Glimpses of other missing persons from other years. Other families drawn into this same dimensional trap. Dozens of people, maybe hundreds, all preserved at the moment of their disappearance. This place collects families, Alex realized. It feeds on their love for each other. That's when they heard footsteps approaching through deeper passages. Real footsteps, not echoes. David Chen emerged from the shadows, looking exactly as he had in November 2018. Behind him came Emma, still 8 years old, still wearing her matching blue jacket, still radiating innocent excitement. "Hello," David said, his voice gentle but sad. "You found us." Emma ran forward, unafraid. Are you here to take us home? Torres knelt to Emma's eye level, fighting back tears.
We want to help you, sweetheart. Your mommy has been looking for you. Mommy?
Emma's face lit up.
Is she still in the regular world? How long have we been gone?
Alex answered gently. 5 years, Emma. In our world, it's been 5 years. Emma's eyes widened. But it only feels like a few weeks. Are we really that old now? You're not aging here, Torres explained. This place has kept you exactly as you were the night you vanished. David's expression grew pained. We've tried to leave so many times. The entrance seals itself whenever we get close. Why did you come here? Alex asked. Emma answered with child's logic. We heard music in the forest. Pretty music, like a lullaby. And there was a door made of light. The entity that controls this place draws families in with whatever they find most comforting, David explained. For Emma, it was beautiful music. For me, it was the promise of unlimited time together. But unlimited time had become unlimited captivity, hadn't it? Can we help you escape? Torres asked. David shook his head slowly. Others have tried. Rescue attempts only make the entity stronger. Emma tugged on Alex's sleeve.
Maybe you can take a message to Mommy? Tell her we're okay?
Alex looked into the 8-year-old's trusting eyes.
We'll find a way to bring you home, Emma.
But even as he spoke, Alex felt the cave walls beginning to shift around them. The entity that controlled this place had heard his promise, and it wasn't pleased. The cave walls began to close in around them, not physically, but dimensionally. Alex felt reality shifting, like standing in a room where the laws of physics were being rewritten in real time.
We need to leave, now.
Torres grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him toward the cave entrance, but David stepped forward, his hand on Emma's shoulder.
Wait, there might be a way.
Emma looked up at her father with complete trust.
What kind of way, Daddy?
The entity feeds on love, on family bonds. But what if we could overwhelm it, give it more emotional energy than it can process? Alex didn't understand. What do you mean? David pulled out the photograph Alex had found in the jacket pocket. The image of him and Emma on their first camping trip, both wearing matching blue jackets, both smiling with pure joy. This picture represents the moment we were happiest together, the moment before everything went wrong. If we could somehow amplify that feeling, project it outward. Emma's face lit up with sudden understanding. Like when I drew pictures on the cave walls. They made me feel better. Exactly, but stronger, much stronger. Torres was already moving toward the exit. We don't have time for theories. The cave is changing. But Alex stayed. Something about David's plan felt right, even if it defied logic.
What do you need us to do?
David handed the photograph to Alex.
Take this back to the outside world. Show it to Emma's mother. Let her hold it. Remember us. Feel the love we shared. That's it?
Emma nodded seriously.
Love is the strongest thing, right? Stronger than scary cave monsters?
The walls shuddered around them. Whatever controlled this place was growing agitated.
Go,
David said firmly,
before it traps you here too.
Alex and Torres ran through the cave passages, following their headlamp beams toward fresh mountain air. Behind them, they heard Emma's voice echoing through stone.
Tell Mommy I still love her. Tell her I'm okay.
They emerged onto the cliff face just as the cave entrance sealed itself. Solid rock, where moments before there had been an opening, as if the cave had never existed at all. But Alex still held the photograph, proof that David and Emma Chen were alive, somewhere between dimensions, waiting for love strong enough to bring them home. 3 days later, Alex knocked on Sarah Chen's door in Portland. Emma's mother had aged in the 5 years since her daughter disappeared. Grief had carved lines around her eyes that no amount of time would erase. I have something that belongs to you, Alex said gently, holding out the photograph. When Sarah saw the image of her ex-husband and daughter, she broke down completely.
Where did you find this?
Alex told her everything. The impossible cliff face, the cave that existed outside time, the family trapped between worlds.
Are they really alive?
Sarah whispered.
They're waiting for you to remember them home.
Sarah held the photograph against her chest and closed her eyes. In that moment, Alex felt something shift in the air around them, something warm and hopeful and impossibly strong. Somewhere in a cave that existed between reality and dreams, a little girl looked up at her father and smiled.
Daddy, I think Mommy heard us.
The matching blue jackets still hang on that impossible cliff face. Climbers occasionally spot them, though most assume they're prayer flags or climbing markers left by previous adventurers. But on quiet mountain evenings, when the wind is just right, some visitors claim they can hear voices echoing from the rocks, a father and daughter calling out messages of love that transcend the boundaries between worlds. The Chen family is still out there, somewhere between dimensions, held together by bonds that not even interdimensional entities can break. And sometimes, love really is stronger than the darkness that tries to separate us.